Hodges, and this is Spotlight on Government. And everything has changed with the coronavirus. We're doing things so much different. And so if there's any glitches along the way, just give us credit for being here at all. I have with me today one lady that I've liked for a lot of years, Janet Cruz, Senator Janet Cruz. And actually, you actually have another name added on to Cruz.
It is. It's my married name is Rifkin, so it's Janet Cruz Rifkin. And hi, Bill. It's so good to see you.
It's a lot of fun to have you on the show. You are so active and have been, you actually started out in the trenches managing these campaigns.
I did.
And then all of a sudden there's a spot opened up and you said, well, if I can manage one, I can do one.
And I remember that day because it was a special election. Mike Shanti was a soldier, and he was pulled up to an appointment at the Pentagon. So it left that West Tampa seat open, and it was a short election, 2 months, and I won. And because it was a special election, when you're elected that night, you're the member the next morning.
Wow.
I woke up and
didn't even know where the restrooms were, right?
Exactly. I woke up. It was Tuesday, the election. So I woke up on Wednesday, went into the office. I opened up the laptop, the state issued laptop, and I saw that seal and I stared at it and I said to myself, what in the hell have you done? So I was elected on that Tuesday and session started the following Tuesday. So I think for several weeks, I was like a deer staring into the headlights of a Mack truck, but it was a wonderful ride, and for 8 years I served in the House and became the minority House leader, and it was an absolute pleasure to serve there. And then 2 years ago, I ran in a very tough race against an incumbent for senator and won by 411 votes.
Wow, that means every vote counts, and then people should realize that.
It really does, Bill. I mean, honestly, I think about those phone calls I made or those extra couple of doors that I knocked on when it was just about nightfall and I was tired and it was hot. And I said, just a couple more, keep going. Every vote does count. And especially now in November where COVID is, weighing heavily on folks and they're worried about going into the polls. Please request your absentee ballot. Every vote will count for every.
I've been voting absentee for about 35 years.
Have you really?
Because my travel schedule was such that I could never be sure on election day. And by the way, since 1962, when I first voted, I have never missed an election that I was eligible to vote in.
Well, I talked to some folks and they're like, oh, no, I want to do it in person.
That's great.
I'm not sure. And that's wonderful. But this is a different election cycle. We're in the midst of a pandemic. So I'm begging people, if you haven't considered it, please consider it. Make sure that you follow the directions to the letter. Make sure you sign the back of the envelope. There are so many stops and so many precautions for avoiding fraud that if you don't follow everything step by step, your ballot will just be cast aside until they can prove that.
Validate.
And we in the last couple of years implemented some laws that said if they find an issue or they think it's not your signature, the onus is on the supervisor of elections to reach out to that voter and give them a chance to come in and cure that. In the past, they just set it aside. And now you can actually track your ballot online and know that it was received and counted. So there's really no reason not to do this. In Hillsborough, we're fortunate because they pay for the postage. So you don't even have to find some stamps to send it back.
You get an I voted sticker.
Yes, you get an I voted sticker too. That's right.
By the way, for those that you just love to go down and post your ballot at the voting place, I have a friend who gets his every time by mail, sits at home, gets it all done, makes sure it's right the way it's supposed to be, and then he takes it down to the voting place and hands it in there.
And they have a box there for those that want to do that. You can even, if you decide, well, I was going to vote by mail, but I didn't. And I'm worried now that it won't get in on time. You can take that ballot into your precinct or into early voting. You can turn that ballot in and you can vote. So honestly, I think about the good work that Craig Latimer is doing. They are really making it as easy to vote as it, they're removing barriers so that folks can get in and vote. I mean, it is one of the most wonderful rights of being an American, and you can't ever take that right for granted. There are countries where elections are rigged and elections are not real, and here we are in America where we safeguard that and we hold it to be so precious to us. And shame on us if we're not out there exercising our right as an American. This is
Right.
a great democracy here.
Craig has done a really good job of
Hasn't he?
following up on what Earl Leonard started and Jan Brustansky wanted to do. And unfortunately, by the way, I was the only one that did an interview with Brustansky prior to her heart attack.
Helen Buzansky.
And I was able to hand that interview to her family, as I did with Earl Leonard's family. So this station is so important to so many people because we do things that you won't find on regular television, because I don't have to make news. I don't have to stand here and say, now, why didn't you do, or how come you're not doing, or I looked back 30 years ago and found out you did something, and why did you do that? It's not something I have to do. There's no way I have to worry about it. And so we want to stay with things that are current and to let our guests, as yourself, talk about the things that are important to them. So moving on from elections, what's happening in the legislature that you'd like to share with us?
Well, we have, our only mandate as legislators, when we go up to Tallahassee for 60 days, people think it's all about passing bills, but our only real mandate to the citizens of Florida is that we balance the budget, that we pass a balanced budget. In Florida, we're smart and we know that we cannot spend more money than we take in. So we have to balance the budget based on the money that we've taken in, as well as put money away for reserves for hurricanes and pandemics and anything else that could happen to the citizens of Florida. But we cannot leave Tallahassee until we balance the budget, and both the House and the Senate and the governor, we all agree on the budget.
That's interesting. My wife, Phyllis Hodges, and myself were talking this morning about the possibility of a hurricane. And everybody's so wound up thinking about what's going on with the pandemic that hurricane preparation is not getting there the way it maybe should be. So we sat down and made a list this morning of the things that we're probably going to have to want to stockpile for that eventuality that we have a hurricane hit us and we need that in our cupboards.
Right. And I will encourage people too, because it is hurricane season and you're right, we're not paying attention to it. But I always tell folks, pack a duffel bag that I call your 72-hour bag. If you have to leave home quickly, make a list, like you were saying, Bill, of the items that you would need in 72 hours if you had to leave your home. Don't wait until the last minute. Take your medications and your dog's medications and lots of stuff that you would need to be safe and healthy. And think about that. Put it in a bag. Right now, in the midst of what's happening, we're not really focused. You're right. So just, create a bag for yourself in case you got to leave home.
What's the legislature thinking about right now when we start talking about schools reopening? If I were a parent, honestly, I'd be thinking of homeschooling for a little bit. But of course, if I were a parent, I'd be afraid to death because I'm too old to be a parent again. And I don't have to worry about going out and earning a living because I've got a good income. I don't have to worry about that. So there's a real mixed bag here.
Well, the problem here, honestly, Bill, is that people are feeling like they cannot trust our leaders. And we're just, people are not sure. You hear one group that tells you don't wear a mask, that you don't need to wear a mask. You have the medical experts saying you absolutely should be wearing a mask and you should be washing your hands and you should be staying home. So parents are confused as well. I know that we have delayed the opening of schools in Hillsborough County by a couple of weeks, but I completely, I'm convinced that it will be more than just 2 weeks. I think it'll be 2 weeks and then 2 more weeks and perhaps 2 more weeks until we get into the first 9 weeks of school. And honestly, that's unfair to parents as well. They need to be able to plan. If you say, well, we're going to delay opening for 2 weeks. They make plans for 2 weeks for childcare and somebody to make sure their children are getting their lessons. And then you come again and say another 2 weeks, just call it, just call it and say, we're not going back for the first 9 weeks. Make plans. There are lots of parents who don't have the luxury of working from home. They work in the service industry, or they work in the airports, or they work in places where they must physically be there. And they are the ones that are really having the toughest time with all of this, because they have to figure out who will take care of my children if the daycare centers are not open and the schools are not open. Many parents rely on the school day as part of their childcare besides.
Oh, certainly.
Education.
We always have.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, not just now, but going a long way back. And mental health for us, getting the kids out of the house.
Exactly. And I truly feel for those parents. These kids have been home since March or April?
Right.
So I know parents are running out of ideas. What do we do? And now they're going to delay the opening of school. But this is about saving lives. It's inconvenient and it's driving a lot of people crazy. But, we have to think about the children that go to school, that go back home, especially Black and brown children that go back home to multi-generational households. It's not just them and mom and dad. It's grandma and grandpa. Maybe it's a great grandparent. Maybe it's an uncle. But, bringing this virus home could be very dangerous, perhaps not to the child, but to the folks that live in the household. And teachers, you have teachers have been teaching for 20, 25 years. They're probably closer to my age, maybe 30 years. And, they are very worried, and they've been given a mandate that if they don't show up to teach, they'll lose their position, which is completely unfair for them as well.
I was listening to the head of the teachers union saying that there is a whole lot of teachers that are looking at putting in their papers and retiring. And if we had a mass exodus of teachers right now with the amount of classrooms that were uncovered last year, and if you look at here in Hillsborough County, which is a huge school district, when you look at that, last year, if I'm not wrong, there were a number of schools where the air conditioning was not operating properly, where they had to bring in units to try and keep them. Well, if the air conditioning isn't working, air change isn't happening in the school. And one of the things that I've seen, and I feel is very scary for me if I were a parent, is that people keep talking about kids. Oh, the kids will get over it. They have 3-4 days with the sniffles and so forth. But we're finding that somewhere in the neighborhood of 20% of the people who didn't die, but who got this, will have long-term disabilities with their lungs, with their heart, even with brain problems. So it's not just a matter of whether these kids will die or not, it's whether they'll be disabled for long periods of time.
Yeah. And honestly, Bill, what is the message here? Is the message that opening the state so that businesses can make money is more important than the people who live here? I do not agree with the fact that they're saying, well, sure, some of the seniors and those that are compromised health-wise will be collateral damage. Is that really fair? Is that who?
I don't like that herd thing, that mentality that says, well, acceptable losses.
Not at all. Not at all.
Not in our society. If we're not talking about a third world nation that can't support its people.
Right.
You get to Bangladesh or some third world nation, you might find that this is going to happen. But We don't have to have that happen here.
Well, we didn't have to have that happen if we had just had some leadership in our country that agreed that this was not a hoax. And if they had just agreed that we were in danger, we could have flattened this curve much quicker. And also,
It did start to flatten a little bit, but just long enough for somebody to take a breath and say, let's open up.
Since when are we a people that are more concerned about profits than lives? I don't know. I'm very disappointed in the way all of this was handled. I'm disappointed in the leadership on the federal level. I'm disappointed in our leadership on the state level. That's one of the reasons that we have to work for change. Back again to what you said, Bill, every vote counts. If you're not happy with what you're seeing, then make sure you get your butt to the ballot.
Well, I think it's important that both parties put up qualified candidates, which has not always been the case here in Florida.
Yeah, well, I couldn't agree.
I won't go into who I'm pointing to, but quite honestly,
more. Since I served with some of those folks, I couldn't agree with you more.
we do need to look at, I actually, and this a personal thing, I'm for open primaries. I want to see the best people and not have that huge pool of people who are independents never get a choice of who goes for the election.
I completely agree. And, Bill, the trajectory of independent voters is skyrocketing.
Oh, yes.
And it is the time. The time is now that they should be included in the primaries as well.
Yeah, they're disgusted with both parties.
Well, and I understand when I see a pandemic that's out of control in one of the most sophisticated countries in the world, I'm fed up too.
We also had another broadcast that I did with you because I have a radio show that's called Veterans Corner Radio. And you sit on the military and the space committees. Would you like to talk a little bit about what's going on in those two committees?
Yes, I will tell you that I've served, I think I told you, for 10 years now, and my favorite committee is Military Affairs and Space. Mostly because we focus so much on veterans, and we know that we're a very veteran-friendly state. So we push forward policy that helps veterans. And I think I told you about a bill that I'm running. It didn't pass last year, but I want it to pass next year. And that is if a veteran is injured and they're eligible for the GI Bill, the percentage of their eligibility for tuition reimbursement or coverage is based on their months of service. So a veteran came to me and he is paralyzed from the waist down, and he said, look, I want to provide for my family and I want to go to school for programming, but because I was only in combat for 14 months, I only qualify for 60% of the GI Bill. So he said, I can't afford the other 40% of tuition. I'm on a disability check. He said, it's just not fair. And so I ran a bill that said, if you're here in the state of Florida and you go to a state university and you are a disabled veteran, then we'll pick up the other percentage so that you can go on to college. What's crazy and ironic about that bill is that that same veteran that only qualifies for 60% disability on tuition, because he's a disabled veteran, his children and his wife get 100% tuition reimbursement, but this poor guy only got 60. So that's just
what's wrong with this picture?
A glitch in the system that I am determined to fix. And another bill that I'm working on is that, we're oftentimes looking for alternative methods of treatment for veterans who are suffering from PTSD or extreme anxiety or many other things. So through much research, we've found that medical marijuana has been an alternative to Xanax and some of the other medications, anti-anxiety medications, as well as PTSD medications. So I put forward a bill that said, if you're a disabled veteran or that you can apply for your medical marijuana card, and we as Floridians will waive the fee, the state fee for the license. So I'm working on that bill too. I think that will help lots of veterans.
You know, I was talking to somebody about medical marijuana the other day, and they said, oh, we don't need another addiction. And I said, you know what? I have watched, and I can show you in the newspapers on a regular basis, where somebody sits down and drinks a 6-pack of beer and beats up on their family.
Yeah.
But I have never seen where somebody smoked a joint and then beat up on their kids.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with that whole area of thought.
I completely agree. And I say that if you haven't walked in a veteran's shoes, then don't judge them. You know, if medical marijuana is what helps them not take an opiate, if medical marijuana is what helps them not take a sedative, then so be it. And we should be fully supportive of that person that served our country and went forward and is now injured or not completely whole.
I work with veterans every day. It's my quest at this point in my life. I don't have to worry about making a paycheck. I'm blessed in that way. So I like to work with vets, and I talk with a lot of them. And I find that some of these people have been over in combat areas 6, 7, 8 times. And then they come home. And when they come home, they find that nobody even knows they've been in battle. Afghanistan, where's that? Is there still going on? I thought that was over.
Wow.
And they had to remember, as they were over there, every trash can, every small child was a potential enemy. And then they get back here and they walk the streets and there's that trash can, there's those kids. And it's awful for them.
It's awful. I remember when I went to Eckerd College many years ago, they had a program for visiting professors and authors. They had these residences on the water that they could come and stay. And there was a 4-star general that was there that served in, during Vietnam, and they would come in oftentimes and just sit in the classroom and listen to the lectures. And so we were talking about something, and he mentioned that there he was in Vietnam, you know, in the rice paddies, in the fight, up to his elbows in gunfire. And then he would get a pass, and his wife would meet him in Hawaii at some luxurious hotel. And he said there was such a disconnect in his mind that it was really very difficult for him to think that, you know, a 6-hour plane ride or whatever the time was, maybe 10-hour plane ride, and he was back in a luxury hotel. His mind couldn't connect to it all. And, you know, I'm old enough to remember how poorly the Vietnam vets were treated, mostly because of the draft, I guess, but they came back and they weren't considered heroes. At least today we're appreciating our military. Oftentimes I've seen it happen before, but my son has a little restaurant. It's called Big Ray's Fish Camp, and they have great grouper sandwiches. So it's close to the base. And if I'm in there or I'm placing an order and there are oftentimes military men and women in line, I always pick up their tab and tell them thank you. And I appreciate what they've done for me as an American. But you know, the women and men coming back from Vietnam they were never appreciated the way they should have been.
I was in during early Vietnam, and I did not go to Vietnam. I was flying on B-52 bombers around the world, but I never actually was stationed in Vietnam. But the point that it was that I got spit on in downtown Dayton, Ohio, by a protester. Mm-hmm. And I look at these guys who actually went over and got shot at, and some of them were tunnel rats, and everything they turned around, they got no welcome back. And, you know, today I talk with a lot of vets, and people will say, thank you for your service. Mm-hmm. And I've had people tell me, in fact, I was talking to Danny Burgess, our director of the Florida Department of Veterans Affairs.
I love that guy.
Oh, he's great. He's just absolutely super. He's doing a wonderful job up there. In fact, we did an interview with him on Veterans Corner Radio. But the fact is, a lot of these guys don't feel like they deserve all this praise now because they were put down for so long.
Well, I agree. I mean, you know, think about a kid who was raised by someone who did nothing but scold them or never made them feel that they were worth anything. It's no wonder that our Vietnam vets were the ones that suffered, even though not identified at the time, but they suffered the most with assimilating after the war and PTSD, because we never made them feel that all of that fighting and everything that they went through, we never validated what they did for our country.
I'll be interviewing next month. In fact, it would be the first interview in August that I do, the current commander of the Vietnam Veterans of America, actually president. And I'm excited to hear what he has to say, because I've had several of the different commanders from various things like VFW and American Legion, and I just did Disabled American Veterans, DAV, which I'm a member of. And each of these people have a great story to tell.
Oh, I'm sure. Well, I want any of them that are listening to know how much we appreciate them and their sacrifices, so that I have my freedom. Makes it too easy to take it all for granted. But there was a young man that worked for me in my office when I was a House member, and he's still around. He's a good friend, but his grandmother disappeared in the middle of the night in Cuba. Because and was detained and missing for 2 years, because she had a particular individual in her house that could have been identified as someone with the opposition, but 2 years just gone. It's like all of the freedoms that we fight for our democracy, we shouldn't really ever forget. We take it all so for granted. Our life is good. Of course, we're in the midst of a pandemic, but this is still the greatest country in the world.
Well, it is, and it's because people will run for office, like yourself. And I do appreciate the fact that you're willing to take time out of yesterday to do the one show with me, and time out of the day to do the second one. And I want to know, you will come back, right?
I would love to. It's great.
We'll look forward to it on both shows, because it's so important to get this information out. I'm Bill Hodges. This has been Spotlight on Government. You're unique, you're special, and you're great. Tell yourself so often, because you are, and I'm getting into Congress already.
Okay.
State Senator Cruz, thank you for taking the time to be with me today. I appreciate it. And I know our listeners will also.
Telling all my friends out there that it's Janet Cruz, and I love you.
Well, I'm sure they love you too. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for being with us. We'll see you on the next Spotlight on Government.